Welcome on into WRAL Triangle and Two. Do I have some good news for you? It is NFL Draft Week. Yeah, round of applause. We
Yes.
finally made it. We finally made it. I'm Louis Fernandez. He's Mark Bergin. And today we are going to give you a special treat, kind of depending on how you look at it. We are going to go ahead and go through the NFL Draft for the Carolina Panthers. We've each mocked our compilation of, 6 draft picks that the Panthers have this year. And it's going to be a fun time. So we're breaking format a little bit. We're going to be focusing only on the Panthers. But hey, the NFL draft is such a big deal. It's so much fun to talk about. Mark, I'm excited. I know you're excited.
Yes, we get the keys to the Cadillac today, Louis. So buckle up if you're listening or watching. So for today's format of the show, it's what we would do if we were in charge of the Panthers. This is not what Louis and I will think will happen because it's pretty much a foregone conclusion. Bryce Young's going to go number 1 overall, but we still have some time between now and Thursday night.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I wish I had Scott Fitterer's job. Get a chance to be a GM. That'd be really cool. But there are certain things that we're going to see that we've looked at that we're like, okay, the Panthers need to address this. There are certain fits that have to be adjusted, things along those lines. And Mark, we mentioned it a little bit when we were getting ready here. This is a hard position for the Panthers to be in. Obviously, having number 1 is great, but there really are not that many draft picks that they have available to them. So it's definitely one of those things when you get done with this mock, you look back and you're like, okay, they are not able to fill all the holes. So you're going to have to kind of pick and choose based on what's available.
Yeah, but glass half full, Lewis, would be because there are a lot of needs that the Panthers have. You can pick best player available in a lot of different situations. So once we go beyond the first pick, which we know is going to be a quarterback, let your creativity flow a little bit, Lewis. So I'm excited for today.
Okay, let's just do it. Let's get the ESPN music buzzing in the background, that little chime going on. Okay, Mark, first round pick number 1 for the Carolina Panthers. Roger Goodell walks on the stage. He says, with the first pick in the NFL draft, the Carolina Panthers have selected.
Again, I think we know it will be Bryce Young. I would personally take CJ Stroud as well. We talked about this in previous episodes too, Lewis. At this point, I know what camp everyone's in, whether you're a Stroud guy, a Bryce Young guy, if you like Anthony Richardson, but we know it'll be Young. I would pick Stroud, though. The size, the combination of making plays in the pocket, the strong arm strength, and the trajectory that we know of quarterbacks, that you got to have a certain size, you got to be a certain height. That's my argument against Bryce Young. It looks like Bryce Young will be the guy. There have been quarterbacks of his size and stature that have had success in the league. I think those players, the Drew Breeses, the Russell Wilsons of the world, are the exception, not the norm. Personally, I would take Stroud. I'd also consider Anthony Richardson. I don't think I would have quite the courage to do it, Lewis. But I'll say this, I think the upside on Anthony Richardson is higher than any other quarterback in this draft. I personally would take Stroud if I was in the position of Scott Fitterer with the Panthers, David Tepper, to say, hey, who are we taking number 1 overall? I would take CJ Stroud.
So I'm going to go with Bryce Young. And we kind of established this in last week's episode. But I think that there's been a lot of it almost feels like slander being tossed around about CJ Stroud the past week or so. And that's, to me, when that starts happening with the top prospects, that's when I know we've had too much NFL draft coverage. That's when I know it's time everyone to take a break, because I still think CJ Stroud is very good, even if he didn't do well on his S2 test. I still think he has a lot of potential, but it's like some of these things start getting thrown out there about how he's lazy and unaccountable. And I'm like, okay, everybody, let's take a deep breath here. That's going too far. But I do think Bryce Young is going to be the guy. I think he's gonna. I think he has the potential to have a very high ceiling. Obviously, the body issues are a big concern. There have only been 3 other quarterbacks to be drafted since 1970 that have come in at 5'10". I did these numbers. I just recorded the story on this. That came in at 5'10" or right at 5'10", excuse me. And the only 2, one, his name has escaped me, but he was playing mostly in NFL Europe after a year or so. But the other 2 were Doug Flutie, number 1.
Shout out Boston College.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And then Kyler Murray. So there is some potential there. I think teams are willing to take a risk on those smaller quarterbacks that may not fit the norm if they have incredible college production. And that's exactly what Bryce Young has had, incredible college production. It's just going to be about how does he continue to shape his game around the future of the NFL? Does he get rid of the ball faster? Does he protect himself a little bit better? I think he's going to need those traits. He's going to have to learn those things in order to really take full advantage of what he can offer. But I do think he can offer a lot, and I think it's a really good pick at number 1.
Lewis, what changed between now and a few weeks ago when it was looking like Stroud was the guy? What changed for you?
So for me, I think it's a combination of my thought was there's no way the Panthers pick Bryce Young because of the history that we've seen with Frank Reich and the quarterbacks that have started for him. They all tend to be a little bit taller, a little bit bigger. But really, I think it was less about what CJ Stroud was not doing right and more about what Bryce Young was doing right. And I think when you go back and you look at the film and what he brings to the table, the way he handles himself in the pocket, the way he extends plays, just like the playmaking ability, it's a good combination, I think, of there's risk. There's going to be risk with any pick you take, but there's also a lot of reward. It's not quite as much risk as, say, like an Anthony Richardson, who I do think could be very successful in the right situation with the right coaching staff around him. But I just think it ultimately was Bryce Young and getting to know him more as a prospect and the way he just shot up the draft boards. Truly, he was number 1 for so much of the offseason. And, I think if the Texans were picking number 1, there would have been no question. Yeah, he's going to be the number 1 guy. But I think it's huge. I think it'll be a really good fit for the Panthers as long as they continue to build around him. But that's the first pick.
I would consider Richardson too, and people might think I'm crazy, but here's another, let me add to my argument. We know the size and speed, the explosiveness, forcing defenses to play 11 on 11. I know he's very raw. Name me a skill position player or an offensive lineman in the past 2 seasons that's going to go in the first or second round out of Florida. You can't do it.
That's fair.
You can't do it. So look, Richardson's not going to go number 1 overall, but I'm curious to see how high he goes. Because if he goes to the right fit, the right system, the right coaching, the right personnel, I know you could say this about anyone, but he hasn't been set up for success at Florida. And I think I look at CJ Stroud and I look at all the first round receivers that they have every single year. I look at Bryce Young, where I know this past season he didn't have a ton of help at Alabama, which is a testament to him. But the year before, are you kidding me? So who's Richardson had? And everyone's like, oh, well, did you look at the tape? Did you look at the tape? Yeah, I looked at the tape. I also looked at the players that were around him. You put him against pair him with a lot better players in the NFL. I'm telling you, man, we're going to be looking back on this being like, what were we thinking with Anthony Richardson? And I'm also of the mindset, fit and franchise, the organizations and the coaching is heck of a lot more important than the individual prospect who comes in. There are only a handful of John Elway, Peyton Manning, Joe Burrow type quarterbacks, Andrew Luck, that can totally transform a franchise.
One thing I'll say about Richardson, and then we'll move on to the second round here.
Yes.
He had he was asked to do a lot at Florida. I remember correctly, just reading through some articles. His average depth of target was about 10 yards, which was very high. There were a lot less of those kind of intermediate throws we're going to work with. Some people argue that's because he couldn't make them, but he was consistently tasked with difficult throws, which I think is part of the reason why his accuracy, his completion percentage was lower. Okay, so that's the first run out of the way, the first round. Assuming that the Panthers do not make any kind of trades, their next pick would be in the second round, pick number 39. Mark, get us started. Who do you have?
All right, so let's improve the front 7. Brian Burns needs help on the other edge. There's not an edge rusher I like here, but there's someone who could pair with Shaq Thompson. I'll take linebacker Trenton Simpson out of Clemson, a 4.43 40. So 235, 6'2", size and speed. In previous drafts, I think he would be a first-round pick. Linebacker not quite as valued in the league anymore. But look at the teams across the division. There's not a lot of strong quarterback talent. So what are you going to do if you don't have a star quarterback? You run the ball. So I think Simpson helps with the Panthers in the front 7. They're shifting to like a 3-4 defense, a defense I think that'll be more of a hybrid fit. I'll take Simpson out of Clemson at pick number 39 for the Panthers.
I think there are a couple of solid linebacker prospects at the very top of this draft class, and then I think it just kind of it falls off a lot after that. And drafting linebackers is tricky. I like that spot. We're kind of in the same wavelength here with our pick in terms of focusing on the defense and trying to build up that 3-4. That kind of transition is always difficult, especially you need to get the players to make that transition in scheme. So with my second pick, pick number 39, I'm going with BJ Ojulari, the edge out of LSU. He was there still on my draft board. I think it makes a lot of sense for them. He's everything you read about him. He's just kind of that, sticks his like nose to the ground, like really works hard kind of guy, like great guy to have in the locker room. He was asked to do a lot last year at LSU. He has a lot of potential, I think, to kind of grow into his frame a bit more. And he would be a great complement outside of Brian Burns. Because they do need those kind of guys who can play a little bit of that stand up or put their hand down in that 3-4. And I think too, when you look at with everything that they could have done to trade Brian Burns this offseason, I think it's just a matter of time before they do extend him. But you always want to have that backup youth coming in that could fill in a role there. He was a little bit injured this offseason, so he didn't get as much testing as I normally would like to see. But I do think there's a lot of potential there, especially with the second round. I'll be really interested. I think he's 21 years old, so he's also young, can grow into that a little bit better. I like investing in athletic players who are young in the draft, especially. So we both went defense with that second pick.
And
so now,
Lewis, you're tapping into that blood. You're tapping into that bloodline. His brother Aziz playing for the Giants as well, so he knows what to expect in the league. Not just a pass rusher either, because you look at the production: 16.5 sacks, 25 tackles for a loss in 3 seasons in Baton Rouge, Louisiana. So I like a guy that can defend the run as well as rush the passer. And I think both of our picks are very similar. It's just, what do we want to prioritize? And we're going to move some players around now that the Panthers have a little bit of a different defensive front. Let's go to the next pick, though.
So third round, you went first for the second round. I'll go first for the third round. So this is where I tried to address the offense again. My third round pick, which is for the Panthers, it is number 93 overall. I went with Ole Miss wide receiver Jonathan Mingo. And I think part of the reason why I decided to go with him, a combination of things. I think he's younger and he's incredibly athletic. I believe his 40 time was like about 4.46, 6'1", 218, I believe is what he weighed in. So I mean, he is a taller guy. He's big. He can be a lot more physical. He brings a speed element to things. And on top of that, I just think that investment in someone who can grow alongside of some of the more veteran guys that they have, like the DJ Charks, the Adam Thielens, I think you need to do that. I had the opportunity to take Josh Downs with my second round pick. And I was so tempted to do it because I do think it would be a great fit and a great matchup for what they do. But part of me was just, I got to lean in and get those edge rushers early on are very important. And I knew that someone like Jonathan Mingo would be here. He needs to work on his route running a little bit, mostly getting in and out of cuts. He'd be a little bit stiff. When you look at his testing, he wasn't as impressive in terms of like 3-cone shuttle and things along those lines. So someone like Adam Thielen could be a good mentor in ways to kind of teach getting in and out of cuts a little bit better. But Jonathan Mingo, I think, is a really solid third round pick. The one comparison I saw was Traylon Burks, the Arkansas wide receiver. He was a first round pick, just big physical guy who can go make plays. But that is why I went with third round. Mark, what do you have in the third round?
Yeah, I like your pick too, Lewis, because you fill the void with DJ Moore now in Chicago as part of the trade to get the first overall pick. So you have to try to plug holes where you can because DJ Moore will not be in a Panthers uniform. I went with cornerback Darius Rush out of South Carolina. And you say, Mark, why are you going defense? I really like JC Horn, but the fact of the matter is Horn has only played 16 games in the past 2 seasons. Foot fracture cost him nearly all of the 2021 season. He had 13 starts a year ago, but again, injuries consistently. So eventually, when the rest of your division catches up and figures out who their quarterbacks of the future are, and there's a huge void in the NFC right now, you're going to need corners on the outside as we need spread more often. You need a stud corner, which I think they'll have in Corn. You need a Robin to your Batman, and then you need a third guy a lot of times, but you need someone in the slot. You need someone in the nickel because teams are going to have 3-4 receivers consistently out on the field. I think Darius Rush would help solve that problem for the Panthers, and that's who I've got the Panthers taking at number 93.
I like that too, because the cornerback is definitely a need for the Panthers to continue to
Mhm.
develop that depth. JC Horn, is incredibly great when he is healthy, but he has struggled with health. Dante Jackson, I think, is also really good, but he's coming off of a major injury. CJ Henderson's been pretty solid. So I think it's always good to add depth, especially at corner. I don't think you can ever have enough corners. And then it's just about the fit and all of that. So I like that pick in the third round. My question with your draft that I'm seeing so far, maybe we'll continue to see if it continues to build from here, is what are we doing on offense? What are the
Hey,
Panthers
we'll
doing
get
based
there.
on offense?
We'll get
We're gonna
there. Do
get
you
there. We're
want to
gonna
go? That's a great segue, Lewis. I'll go to my next pick if you
Yeah,
like.
which is pick number 114 in the fourth round.
Yes, sir. Wide receiver Nathaniel Dell out of Houston, a Bugatti, 5'10", only 165, but this guy can fly a 4.49 in the 40. He's very, very quick, more than a 10-foot broad jump, and he had the production, 109 receptions, almost 1,400 yards receivers. This guy finds the paint, 17 touchdowns this last season. So he's going to be my Bugatti, not the only receiver I've got the Panthers taking either, Lewis. So
Oh,
your
interesting.
style of car, we'll get there in just a second. I'm teasing ahead to a future pick.
Okay, foreshadowing. I like it. No, I like Nathaniel Dell. I think is a great because when you get to the fourth round, you have to start taking some flyers. You have to go for those traits that you like. Because at this point, no prospect is perfect. If they were perfect, they would have already been taken. So I like going with a combination of production as well as athleticism. I like that pick, and I think he's someone who could especially help them out in the slot at his size. My fourth round pick, number 114. This is where I start to switch. I was going back and forth between the options. I was like, okay, do I want to do offense? Do I want to do defense? Defensive back? What are we looking at here? And I went ahead and zigged a little bit where maybe others should be zagging. I went with Zach Kuntz, the tight end out of Old Dominion, I believe. Hold on, let
Okay.
me just double. Is that right?
Old Dominion and Penn State played at two colleges, Lewis. But I like what you're doing because you bring in, I believe, Hayden Hurst. So you get the two tight ends going, the dual tight ends. And the thing I like about stud tight ends is you've got the size mismatch with defensive backs. It's an extra offensive lineman that you're adding, almost like an additional tackle position. So it's almost like a sixth lineman. So you're faster than a linebacker. You're difficult to guard because of your size for most defensive backs, mismatches, and look, run two tight end sets. I don't think enough teams do this league wide. When you have two really, really good tight ends, the matchup problems you cause opposing defenses, you get the running game going, you get the passing game going, and the play action. If it is Bryce Young as a quarterback, early on, he's going to need checkdowns. This would be a great pick for him to be able to pair him with a tight end that has the ability to catch the ball as well.
Well, and two, I think so one thing when you look at this draft is there are a lot of talented tight ends, right? Tight ends are difficult to predict. A lot of times they don't contribute in that first year. They're going to need time to develop. That's why I think using like a first round pick on them is not always the best idea, unless it's like a surefire can't miss type of player, Kyle Pitts. But even Kyle Pitts, who had a really good rookie year, struggled last year. So tight ends a little bit harder to project in terms of direct production. When you look at some of the best tight ends out there, they went in later rounds. They were added as flyers because they were athletic, because they had size, and it's like, okay, we can do something with him, we can coach him. Zach Kuntz is 6'7". He's 6'7", 245, 250, I believe. His athleticism, his testing for athletically is off the charts. His RAS score, which for those who don't know, RAS score it combines a lot of different of the testing variables and compares them to the average to other people at that position, how they tested. So out of 10, Zach Kuntz had a 9 point. Let me see if I wrote down here. He was in the nines. So he's someone who is incredibly athletic and could grow into a receiving tight end threat. You have a few tight ends on the roster. Obviously, Hayden Hurst is he's a former Bengal. I'm a Bengal guy. And he has a lot of receiving options. He's good. He does get injured on occasion, so something to watch for there. So continue to develop that depth. continue to grow that position. And, maybe you get a diamond in the rough in Kuntz out of Old Dominion.
A 4.55 and a 10-foot-8-inch broad jump. That explosiveness. And
Yeah.
Lewis, he lays down and it's like 4 extra yards at 6'7" every time he touches the ball.
Yeah. The knock you're going to hear against him is that he's not as fluid in terms of his on the field route running as you would expect. He also didn't have a whole lot of production, but at this point, you're in the 4th round. The prospects are going to be flawed. You are drafting for potential, and there's all kinds of potential with him. Okay, now we move on to the 5th round. Let's see here. It is.
Let me go. I can go.
Excuse me. No. It's still the 4th round. Pick number 132. This is one of those comp picks.
Yes. I'm going to go with Nick Hampton out of Appalachian State. Address the edge rushing needs that we talked about earlier. Pairing someone opposite Burns. This is where I'm getting my edge rusher. I think the Panthers are going to be able to move some guys around up front depending on how they want to format the defense. Again, 3-4, more of a hybrid. This is where I go edge rusher for the Panthers. So I went, again, Nick Hampton out of Appalachian State with this pick.
Yeah. And I think these last couple of picks are where we're seeing the lack of picks really starting to impact, because you want to go out and get these depth guys. You want to try and throw some darts and see if you can hit a diamond in the rough type player, but you just don't have those. The Panthers don't have another pick past the 5th round. The 5th round is the last round that they pick in. No 6th round picks, no 7th round picks. I continue to lean into the defense on this one, and I went ahead and went with Trey Tomlinson, the cornerback out of TCU. He kind of projects a lot more as a nickel, and they do need a nickel corner. Now, we talked about not all prospects are perfect. He's 5'7", about 160-ish. So he is very small, but he is a playmaker. He has the ability to, get interceptions, play tight. He started consistently on the outside for the Horned Frogs. So I like the tenacity. This is one of those picks where I'm like, we don't know what the Panthers are thinking. His size could just completely take him off the board for the Panthers, make it not even a possibility. But at this point, I want to bet on athleticism and production. And while the size is difficult, I think Trey Tomlinson could be a really good fit should he, find his way onto the roster consistently. But there you go. Yeah, that's Trey Tomlinson.
And guess who he went up against every day in practice, Lewis, at TCU? Quentin Johnson, who's like 6'3". Yeah, so if he can play up against that every day, listen, it's not about the size of the dog. It's about the fight in the dog. Listen, I'm always going to root for the little guy. So I love this pick, Lewis.
Him and thank you. Him and Emmanuel Forbes is another guy at Mississippi State who weighs, I think, like 170-ish, like hoping to get to 180. So there are some smaller size cornerbacks. There are a lot of size concerns when you look at some of these prospects this year in the draft. So you kind of have to pick and choose what your battle is. I think if you're all going to base everything solely on size, you're going to miss out on some guys, especially in this draft. If the Panthers take Bryce Young, they prove that size is not necessarily the biggest thing they're looking at. So, all right. That is the 4th round. So now we move on to the 5th round. This is the final pick for the Carolina Panthers, pick number 145, assuming they don't make any kind of trades. Mark, you went first on the last one, so I'll go first on this one. I went with double dipping in the defensive backfield. I'm going to go with Corey Trice Jr., cornerback out of Purdue. I was honestly very surprised that he was still there on the board when I went to go pick him. He's, the opposite in some ways of Tomlinson. He's tall, has a long frame, athletic. He had some knee injuries that he was dealing with back, I think it was the beginning of the 2022 season. But he's someone who I think could really grow into his frame and be a great outside cornerback. A lot of this was about the value. Him still being there in the 5th round really shocked me. So it was one of those things where I think you had to go get him if you were the GM in that kind of situation. So we went with Corey Trice Jr., cornerback out of Purdue, with the final pick in the draft for the Panthers.
I see what you did there. So how I made my car analogy with receivers, you're doing the same thing at the cornerback position, Lewis.
Yes, absolutely. So what's your final pick here, Mark? And then we can reflect upon all of them.
Yes, I've got Dontavian Wicks out of Virginia, 6'1", 6'2"-ish, so more size. 4.62 in the 40, which is a little bit slower for receivers, but go up and get it 39-inch vertical and a 10-foot, 10-inch broad jump. So this is the guy where it's like one-on-one in a scenario against a smaller, undersized corner. This is someone who can play basketball, if you will, in a jump ball situation, someone who's able to go up and get it. again, let's get Bryce Young all the help he could get, assuming he's the first overall pick. And so another receiver. To me, it's not so much, okay, we only need one guy to fill the void by DJ Moore. Get multiple players. Don't put that onus on one individual player, considering what Moore has done to this point in his NFL career. So
Yeah.
I'm with you too, though, Lewis. Like, it's like I feel robbed that this podcast is almost getting cut short because the Panthers don't have a ton of picks, but that's the
No.
premium that they had to pay to get number one overall.
Well, and ultimately that's what it's going to boil down to, right? With the Panthers making some of these trades and giving up some of these picks, is you have to do more with less. So these fourth round picks, this fifth round pick, all the more important that you hit on these. It's I think there's a bit of a philosophical kind of debate, right? Do you want higher picks or do you want more picks? Do you draft pick as like a lottery and you want to enter the lottery as many times as you can, or do you want to aim for those top prospects that you know are going to be, probably there are busts all over the place, but
Yeah.
which you will probably be pretty good. And so the Panthers have kind of made that decision where they've decided to trade up and to get someone that they know will be good, or they say they're pretty sure will be good, and then forfeiting draft picks in the later half for it. One other person I want to throw out there, and I did a couple of drafts, and but the first time it's so addictive.
Couldn't help yourself.
No, I couldn't. But there was very late one player who was available to me, and he was available in the second draft I did, but I decided to go with the cornerback out of Purdue, Tajay Spears, a running back out of Tulane. He's incredibly explosive. I think I'm saying his first name right. He's incredibly explosive. He's one of those guys where you watch and it feels like everyone else is moving slower. He is smaller, but he's someone that if the Panthers were able to get him later in the rounds, he could be a good complement to Miles Sanders, should they choose that. And I'm always for trying to get younger and more explosive at running back. I think that's always a great choice.
Running back by committee and keeping guys fresh in the backfield too is the name of the game. But Lewis, I cannot wait for Thursday, Friday, and Saturday. I know that you're going to be part of our WRAL coverage on Thursday night when the Panthers have the first overall pick. We have crews in Kansas City, Missouri for the draft too. So we're going to keep everyone covered. And then here on WRAL Triangle and Two, the night of the draft, we will have a reaction podcast to whoever the Panthers pick number one overall. It's looking like it's going to be Bryce Young. So I can't wait to break everything down and let the chaos begin, because Thursday night, it all goes down in Kansas City, Missouri, and I cannot wait.
Yeah, I'm definitely the type of person that the NFL draft coverage like appeals to. There are a lot of fans who are like, I don't care. Let's just get to the start of the regular season. But I'm here like, oh man, prospect number 96 out of so-and-so. I'm so excited to see if he goes in the third round. You know what I mean? I adore it. I love it. This is like Christmas. I'm very excited to see how things unfold. And the Panthers have been in an offseason of transformation. Their free agency, I think they knocked out of the park. They did very well. They were aggressive. They have a great coaching staff now, I feel like. And then the question is, okay, that's part one of free agency. Part two is the draft. And with only 5 picks, assuming there are no trades, with only 5 picks, you have to do, or 6 picks, excuse me, you have to do the most with what you have available to you. So let's see what the Panthers end up doing, Mark.
Yeah, and I just hope we get chaos, like, players bringing their babies up on stage and pictures of relatives and just the reaction, the pure joy, because you see players' journeys and everything that their family, friends, close ones, loved ones, their community did to get them to that point. It's the culmination of a lot of hard work and players realizing their dreams to get to playing at an NFL level. And look, there's only 250 some picks every single year. So even to hear your name selected in any of the 7 rounds is a tremendous, tremendous honor. And to see that reaction live on television, whether it's someone that's in the green room and a quarterback that's got to wait too long, or someone celebrating at home with loved ones in the community, it is the absolute best. And like I said, I just hope we get those moments where we're talking next week, Lewis, where it's like, did you get a load of this, or did you see this?
Yeah.
I really, really cannot wait. It's one of the best days of the year.
I'm pretty bummed too. So make sure you watch. We have that, like Mark was mentioning there, WRAL during the 7 p.m. newscast. We're going to be having a Carolina Panthers draft special. That's 7 p.m. on Thursday. And we'll have coverage all throughout the course of the week, everywhere you watch WRAL 999, all of that kind of stuff. And then, of course, we have new episodes every Monday at 5 p.m. And then we'll be sure to get up probably an emergency pod, like Mark was saying,
Yeah.
when we get done with the first pick in the draft for the Carolina Panthers and what they're hoping will be a future franchise quarterback, the next in the long line, the Jake Delomes, the Cam Newtons, all of that.
Yeah, our listeners are stuck with us, Lewis, whether they like it or not, before next Monday. So what can I point right here? They can, or hang on, I got the wrong side. Like they can subscribe right there.
Something
Hit that
like
subscribe button on the 99 Fan YouTube page is what I'm trying to get at, Lewis.
Yes, it's going to be great. We will see you all then. Here's hoping for a happy draft season for all of us.